Ankh and Ma'at. Ankh and Ma'at. I am truly hoping that you are well. I must apologize for being a little late. I'm hoping that you come in. Ankh and Ma'at, Ankh and Ma'at. Please join us for Kemetic Ascension. Ankh and Ma'at. Ankh and Ma'at, Ankh and Ma'at. I want to greet you. I want to welcome you. I must say that it has been challenging, boy, to be before you recently. You can see that I had to, due to travel, postpone last Kemetic Ascension, and I am literally still traveling. So I jumped in very quickly to try to get in and hope that we could have our Ascension today. Ankh and Ma'at to you. Ankh and Ma'at, Ankh and Ma'at. It's been some time. Yes, Shane the Watcher 616, Ankh and Ma'at. It has been a long time. I'm assuming you meant to say long time. Ankh and Ma'at to you. Ankh and Ma'at, Black Ace. It's wonderful that you're here. Ankh and Ma'at to you all. Once again, let me say, since there are a few more of you in, that it has been challenging to do Kemetic Ascension. Oh boy, I've been traveling on the weekends, basically for work, and doing conferences. And so it has been pretty challenging. This weekend, it was mostly challenging doing travel with my family, but I am now stationary. So I want to be able to jump in and greet you in Kemetic Ascension. Ankh and Ma'at, Sanet Tashi, I miss you too. I miss you too. Ankh and Ma'at to you all. Ankh and Ma'at. I see Mediaut It TV. Emetep. Yes, Sesh Jabari. Ankh and Ma'at to you from Paris, France. Ankh and Ma'at to you. Ankh and Ma'at to Hemet Netter Sashat, who is there under Yoga Girl Sai. Ankh and Ma'at. Ankh and Ma'at. I hope all is well. I'm truly pleased that you are all here. I'm pleased that you are all here. Rasar Ankh Amin Ra, Ankh and Ma'at from Dallas, Texas, who is always with us. You know that when we begin, I usually ask. By the way, I've said I've been traveling, right? Can you see that I'm not in my priestly attire? I literally ran in the door and decided to jump on. I was a little delayed. Traffic coming back into the area, into New York City, has been crazy, as you can imagine. It's been crazy as everyone, I think, is coming back for their holiday. And so it took a little longer. I kept watching my GPS continue to say that the time had been extended and extended and extended. But I am here. Ankh and Ma'at, and greetings to you all. You know that we begin by asking how long you have been part of Kemetic Ascension and where in the world you are. Some of you are already beginning to do that, and I must greet you all of you who are doing that. Ankh and Ma'at to you. I see Tall God Heru, peace fam, peace to you too. Black Ace is saying you're glad everyone is back and safe in North America. Ankh and Ma'at to you, Black Ace. Anku Jasaneb. Yes, Ankh and Ma'at to you, Ankh and Jasaneb. Ankh and Ma'at to Solomonic TV. Hetep. Ankh and Ma'at to Sanet Tara. Ankh and Ma'at, how are you? Much mer. I am so glad that you are here. Please give myrrh to your entire family and your mate, Hemnetter Waziri. Ankh and Ma'at to you all. I want to once again have to apologize to you. Last Kemetic Ascension, I thought I would be actually I'd actually be back in time, but I was delayed, sitting in an airport waiting. And so I was not able to do Kemetic Ascension last time. I even thought of doing it in the airport, and I tried the Wi-Fi, and wherever I was, the Wi-Fi wasn't working. I had to try to renegotiate flights. It was a little crazy. And then today it was driving. I have been moving around extensively. And so it is challenging to do these some days, but I am committed that this community is important to me, and I know it's important to you. So I'm committed that Kemetic Ascension will continue even when I am rushing in and have only gotten a chance to have a little bit of coffee with some oat milk. That's all I've had. But Ankin Ma'at to you. I'm so glad that you are here. I see Media Outlet TV says that he has been part of Kemetic Ascension for 3 years. Ankin Ma'at to you. Ankin Ma'at to you all. I'm so honored that you're here. I might expect that our numbers might be a little lower today just because last week was postponed, and also some other folks like me are probably traveling as well. But I'm so ecstatic that those of you who are here are here. Ra Amin Ankin Ma'at to you as well. Ankin Ma'at to Keith Darkness. Peace from New York. Peace, peace, peace. What part of New York are you in? I'd love to know. Let me say, let's see, 2 row, Ankin Ma'at. Since KLT off and on, Shane the Watcher 616, you have been more on than off, although I haven't seen you as much in the last few sessions. You have been more on than off, and KLT, Kemetic Legacy Today, was an important show that we did many years ago. Ankin Ma'at to send Jason, one of our full members, an active member, coming to us from Nebraska. Ankin Ma'at to you, Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm so honored that you're here, dear Sen. And I'm honored that you are all here, Let me say to you that I have been planning to have a few meetings with Shrine members. Some of you are here. It is time for us to meet and talk about a new resurgence for the Shrine of Ma'at. Things at the Shrine of Ma'at have changed. We're weathering some challenging times. And I am excited for what the future may bring, but I also am daunted by the task that it will take to rejuvenate the Shrine of Ma'at. Obviously, you know that we did not have an initiation this year. We will have an initiation next year, hopefully early next year. Also, we'll begin discussing priesthood training. And so all of those things they have been a little challenging, but we are weathering the storm and planning to move forward. So please, full members of the Shrine, look forward to an announcement I probably won't do it in December. I probably will do it early in January, but there will be a Shrine meeting for us to discuss how we can rejuvenate and do a few new things as the Shrine of Ma'at changes its look a little bit. Definitely, I'm looking forward to doing that, because I know that this community is an important one that must continue to thrive, and I am absolutely ecstatic about that. Things have changed. You may know, I have not said this here in Kemetic Ascension, but I will say today that you will know that Hemet Netter in Tepe, Anika, is no longer with us. I will say that today. I should say that today. I felt like I've needed to say that to the general community, other than just Shrine members who received an announcement some time ago. As our relationship has ended, there is nothing but myrrh that I have for her, and I'm sure she has for me, but we are going on a slightly different journey. And so that has been very, very challenging. You've probably noticed you haven't seen her for some time. And so that has been difficult, personally, and also in terms of the work of the Shrine, it has been difficult as well. She is not easily replaced. She can never be replaced. And so we have a lot of work to do to ensure that this next stage of the Shrine of Ma'at looks a little different, but hopefully amazing nonetheless. I'm assuming that some of you have heard this for the first time. It has been difficult. I mean, you can imagine it's been difficult for me personally and for her personally. But that is where we're at. And that's just how we have to move. Please know that there's nothing but myrrh between us. This is not an acrimonious situation, but there's some journeys that each of us need to go on that were not as compatible after all of these years. After over 2 decades of marriage, it was clear that those journeys were separate. And so some of you might notice that you've not seen her. Please understand, I am going to say for the 3rd time, I have nothing but myrrh for her. We are still in regular contact. We're still living out of the same space. No, Solomonic TV, she's not with the ancestors, but it has been very difficult. And personally, it has been very difficult. You can imagine that there are many days that I have not wanted to do anything, but we are both trying to grow and do some important things. And she's doing wonderful things. If you follow her on social media, you'll know that she is doing wonderful things, and I support everything that she's doing and hope that she reaches an amazing space, the amazing space that she wants to reach, and I'm sure she wants the same for me as well. So that's the challenge, and so that's what's happening. I have not said that publicly. Notice how all the Shrine members have gone. Most of them have gone quiet because they knew this was happening. She sent an email some time ago so that full Shrine members were aware of this, but the general community was not aware of it. And so I've gotten so many calls during this holiday season wishing her blessings and wondering why people hadn't seen her, that I thought that it was appropriate for me to at least say something here to the Shrine of Ma'at family. And so that's what's going on. Let me say, there's nothing I can say right now, by the way, that will be worthy of what I just told you. There's nothing I can say that will be worthy of what I just told you. I'm just saying, please continue to ask the ancestors and the Neteru to guide both of us, to secure both of us, and to ensure that we are still healthy and wealthy and moving forward. And there's the doorbell. Excuse me for one moment. That is quite unusual, so I need to go answer. Give me one moment. I'll be right back. Let me say, running up and down the stairs is hard. Ankh and Ma'at, it was just a package, so I ran. Ankh and Ma'at to Ronald Green, Hotep. Ankh and Ma'at to the Jati of Bennu of Phoenix, Arizona, William Humphrey. Ankh and Ma'at to Inpu Mdua from Evergreen, Alabama. A full member from Evergreen, Alabama. Whew, those stairs, boy, will keep me winded. I see Keith Darkness says he's in Queens. Ankh and Ma'at to you. That's where I'm from. I'm a raised in Queens kid. Ankh and Ma'at to you. Ankh and Ma'at to Johnny Parker. And once again, Shane the Watcher. Yes, I know some of you probably were wondering what was going on. Tall God Heru, I see that you have some challenges with what's going on Sonnetter TV. We can talk about that off. This is not necessarily the place to do it, as you're saying, but we can definitely talk about it offline. I'm creating some new initiatives as well. Hopefully that will balance out some of it. We'll see. But I have been so busy, I haven't been able to be on there as well as much as you may notice because things are quite challenging. Dua to Black Ace. Dua to you. Ankin Ma'at to Curtis Jackson. Ankin Ma'at. Ankin Ma'at to Jamie Jenny. I hope I'm not messing up your name. Ankin Ma'at to Sinette Willinette, who is with us all the time. Ankin Ma'at praying for us both. Please do, Ronald. Please continue to pray for us both. If Judge Mathis can do it, both of you can. I'm not sure what happened with Judge Mathis. Ankin Ma'at, though. Ankin Ma'at to Seeking Self here from South Carolina. Shatisha Hantum, Ankin Ma'at. Ankin Ma'at, Ankin Ma'at, Ankin Ma'at to you all. Let's shift for a second. Like I said, there's nothing that I can say that is good, that is going to be worthy of the news that I'm sharing with some of you for the first time. There is none, but we will continue and move. As you know, as we begin Kemetic Ascension, we must always begin in the manner that our elder, shrine elder, Baba Heru Ankh Ra Samaj Se Ptah, the keeper of the Shrine of Ptah, has taught us, and that is with that ceremony known as the opening of the way. I'm wondering if there is anyone that would like to come in and do the opening of the way with us, for us. I am putting the link to the StreamYard in the chat. If you'd like to come in and lead us, it would be absolutely amazing. I would be so pleased if you did. But recognize that as this community gathers, whenever we do anything important, we must always begin with the opening of the way, that ritual, that ceremony that was given to us by our elder, that reminds us that throughout all of the challenges, all of the tribulations that we will experience, we are strong enough to weather the challenges and to recognize the tribulations and to be ultimately divine. Ankin Ma'at to Sen Garrick, Stimuli God, Ankin Ma'at to Anthony Jones and New Kemet Spectrum. I am Ankin Ma'at. We seem to be in a stream time across the board. I hope things can be built better than before. Shane, I truly believe that things can be better than before because we were on an upward trajectory and will continue on an upward trajectory. But the Shrine of Ma'at will look a little different. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but definitely we will continue to do what is necessary to be done so that this community will continue to thrive. And so that is what has been happening. For those of you who have wondered why you have not seen Hemet Netter, Anika, there you are. So I needed to say something at some point, right? There were some people who were counseling me never to say anything, but I really didn't feel that that was the most honest thing to do. And so I decided to say something today, especially with all of the personal texts and the calls that I received, even from some shrine members. I decided that this was a good day to say something. So is there anyone that would love to come in and do the opening of the way for us? Once again, you'll notice I'm not wearing my priesthood whites. I actually jumped out of the car and jumped in front of the camera. So you are seeing what Hemnet or Jabari Osaze might look like driving on the New Jersey Turnpike. still wearing African clothing, of course, but not my priesthood whites today. And I didn't get dressed in orange today either. When you're traveling, sometimes my orange and my white, I didn't feel were going to be as comfortable. So I put on a nice black batakari from Ghana, from the Khan people. It's very comfortable and still embraces who I am and who we are. So is there, without anyone seeing anyone, let's go ahead and do the opening of the way, okay? Remember that we must continue to do the opening of the way because This ceremony reminds us just what we are made of. You're going to stand in the position of adoration. That means you're going to stand upright. And remember, this is not theater. Join us. Join us and do this, because it is this ceremony that will allow you to continue to do the important work that you must do. Then what you're going to do is you're going to extend your palms in front of you, and you're going to put the left palm a little further, maybe a little higher than the right palm, and a little further forward as well. From here, what you're going to do is you're going to take the divine cleansing breath. Breathe from your navel. Don't breathe from here. Breathe from your navel. And then you're going to exhale with the word of everlasting life, Ankh. When I do this, I like to breathe from here and then do a nasally Ankh, because I find the nasally Ankh resonates here. So I'm drawing energy from the root, you might call it, all the way to the crown. And so that is the way that I usually do it. I have found over the 30 years or so, nearly 30 years, wow, nearly 30 years that I've been doing the opening of the way, that is the way that I feel most resonant, that I feel the highest vibration of energy. So please join me in chanting the word for everlasting life, Ankh. Anetrak in Bedhet. Nuke in Bedhet. Anetrak. Is someone coming in? Come on, is no one coming in? I thought I saw someone pop for a second. Y'all really gonna make me do this all by myself? I saw someone pop for a second. Let's do this. Why don't you type it in as we go, so we're still doing this together? You know it begins with a Netrak and Bedhet. Who is next? That would be a Netrak. This is the divine masculine. A Netrak Hapi, Nuke Hapi, Twalwinter. And then you turn, yes, and Sanet, I believe, Luna. Then you're turning right in this instance, right? And who are you saying? Who is the divine feminine you're calling here? Anetrak. Come on, who's the divine feminine? You're not knowledgeable enough to assist. That's fine. We're all learning. That's fine. Tall God Heru. Serket. There we go. Dwa, send Jason. Serket, the lady of the scorpion. Anetrak Serket. Nuke Serket. And then we have the one that has, in my name, the most interesting of names in this, at least from someone who speaks English predominantly. Anetrak Kebsenuf, Nuke Kebsenuf, Twawinter. Then we turn so that our backs are facing here. My back would be facing the camera, right? You'd be facing west in many ways. Here we go. Anetrak Ast, she's the divine feminine. Nuke Ast. Anetrak Amset, Nuke Amset, Twalwinter. Then we go all the way, we turn 90 degrees again, and who is the divine feminine we are seeing here? This is when we see the Lady of the Needles. Sometimes they look like, yes, Austin Osset were there. I think there's a delay. Now when we turn here, you'll see the needles or the arrows, a Netrak Neat, Nuke Neat, yes, Dwa, 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 Sanet Luna. And then it is a Netrak Dwamutef, Nuke Dwamutef. He is the jackal. And then we turn again to front. And then what are we doing? How do we go from here? A Netrak Newt, Nuke Newt, the Lady of the Heavens. And then a Netrak Geb, we get down. I usually pat the ground. 1, 2, 3. Nuke Geb. And that is how we go ahead. You would like to know where you can learn on your own. We do it here every Kemetic Ascension. If you just look back at the last Kemetic Ascensions on YouTube or Facebook, you will learn how to do it. Okay, so now we did Newton Geb. Now we do a Netrok Shu. And don't do Nuke Shu yet. Do Nuke Shu when you come all the way around. And we're going to turn, once again, now we're going to turn right, as we have been doing. A Netrok Shu. Give Shu energy. Shu. 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 Nuke Shu. And then his female counterpart. Notice that we started with male there, right? That's a little different than we have been doing with the divine protectresses. But then when we get to Shu and Tefnut, we go male and then female. So we did Shu, now we do Tefnut. And now we say a Netrok Tefnut. Tefnut, give the energy. Tefnut, 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 Nuke Tefnut, Twawinter. Now we say a Netrok Paut in Teru, Nuke Paut in Teru. Anetrok and Boo in Tiru, Nuke and Boo in Tiru, Twawinter. Now we take our chant again. Twawinter, Twawinter. So, did a little more instruction during the opening of the way on this one. I'm hoping that those of you who are new to the opening of the way, relatively new to the opening of the way, are learning the opening of the way. It is a critical ceremony ritual that you can use for your power every day. We always say you should do the opening of the way every day and before you do anything important, because it will allow you to galvanize that divine energy within yourself in order for you to be at peak vibration. It will allow you to be able to do the work that you must do on a regular basis. So Ankin Ma'at to you, Ankin Ma'at, Ankin Ma'at. Okay, let's move. I want to be able to actually go to the word from the Seba'it today instead of going. I know that no one will begrudge me for not doing Hesi, because Hesi is not really something that I have come into the world in power with. But I say that I write Hesi, though. I just don't sound great chanting it. I have a few new Hesi that I'm working on. So in our next Kemetic Ascension, I'm going to teach you 2 Hesi. And in fact, I got a request recently from someone as they were sitting at their table with their family for prayer before food. And I'm going to show you where in the Kemetic text we find prayer before food. It's a perfect, I think, passage that comes to us from the Reyu, Pert, and Haruim Ger, the book that has been unfortunately misnomered the Book of the Dead, that gives us a wonderful prayer before eating. And so I will show you that as well. So let's shift today. I want to go to the word from the Seba'it. And I should say to you that as we talk about the word from the Seba'it, clearly what I want you to do is think a little bit about the period that we are in. While the Kemetic Ascension really and the Kemetic tradition is not based in the Western tradition, we find ourselves ensconced in the Western tradition. We find ourselves within a secular world here in the West. Most of us are coming from the West. Most of the people who are in the Kemetic tradition are in the West, believe it or not. And most of the members and extended family of the Shrine of Ma'at are actually in the West as well. So while it is of critical importance to recognize the traditions of our African ancestors, as they are the fundamental source material for so much that we see today, I think we also have to acknowledge that we still must live secular lives, right? That we still have to do work in the places that we work in, live in the communities that we live in, and experience the world around us, which is certainly not structured to recognize an ancient African tradition. And so what I want us to do is think a little bit about this day that we are on, this week that we are celebrating. And as we do that, I want us to think about the fact that in the United States, the country just celebrated Thanksgiving. And I know that it is perhaps important for us to talk about how our Kemetic ancestors viewed thanks, viewed gratefulness, viewed giving thanks for all that has been given to us by the ancestors and the Neteru. But in addition to that, I think it's important for us to put in context what this holiday actually is. And so we'll do both here today. We'll talk a little bit about the history and talk about how one could think a bit about gratefulness and thankfulness based on ancient African tradition. By the way, a number of people, I'm not looking at the chat as frequently, but I want to say Anken Ma'at to Jess Blow, Anken Ma'at to Tianis Tillman, Robert Bunag. I think I said Anken Ma'at to Marcus Porter, Anken Ma'at to all of you. If I missed, Free Thinkers Podcast, Anken Ma'at in peace. Let me say, if I missed any of you, chalk it up to the head and not to the heart, not to my because I truly am honored that you've chosen to spend part of your amazing Sunday with the Shrine of Ma'at. So, and also Mantu Mandinka. So take a look. As you look at this, as we talk about the word from the Sabaeid, this image in many ways encapsulates some of the mythos, I'll call it at our outset, around this day, Thanksgiving. You can see that it is an image of the pilgrims, of the Westerners, and they are sharing food with native people who are seated there. And it is in many ways a very comfortable scene. It's a very, I guess the best way to describe this is it is a familial scene. It is a scene where you see neighbors celebrating and enjoying, and they in many ways are allowing each other throughout their differences to experience the best of each other. This particular painting is called The First Thanksgiving, 1621, and it's by Jean-Léon Jerome Ferris, painted in 1899. And I want to say to you that as we look at this picture, it is certainly true that there was a gathering that occurred in 1621. But let's be clear that this image is part of the propaganda that has been used by Western societies, that has been used by people of, I'm going to call them right now, European descent, by the Tamhu in the West, to, in many ways, argue that their presence here is one where they have been neighborly. Their presence here is one where they have broken bread and shared a meal with those people who were here. It certainly seems to be an image that would be the basis of so much of what we see in schools today, the descriptions that we see in schools. But I must say that it is propaganda. It is propaganda. As we look at this, we must recognize that this event marks the beginning, in many ways, of the permanent presence of the British and others here in what would become the United States. And we must know that this story did not go well for the natives. It did not go well for them. Let's look at the history so that we're able to speak truth to power. Let's look at the history so that we are able to speak truth to power. And Ankh and Ma'at to just in time. I'm not sure. I think he's asking everyone what their favorite African country is. Of course, I'm hoping that means that you all have traveled as well. Ankh and Ma'at to Sinette, Kazi, Shep. Haven't seen you in a minute, Sinette. Ankh and Ma'at, a full member. Ankh and Ma'at to Hero, Juti, Pata, Umika, Temra, Ankh and Ma'at, one of our full members. Ankh and Ma'at, Ankh and Ma'at. Ankh and Ma'at to Miss Mena, who's been with us for 3 years. Ankh and Ma'at to you. Hemet Netter Sashat says this description is straight up lies, genocide, colonization, and enslavement followed. I can almost hear her voice saying that, by the way. And she is absolutely in Ma'at as she says that, because you should know that this is while an event actually occurred. This is almost like me saying that when I ransacked your house, when I broke into your house, when I forced my way into your home, I said to you, why don't you have a seat? And we're looking at that seat, at the fact that I offered you a seat in your own home, as something that we should be grateful for, as a way for us to think about how to be neighborly, when in actuality, what has been belied here is the fact that I did so at gunpoint, that I would rob your home and do the worst possible things to your family. And that is the way that this propaganda has been shifted in a manner that is not historically accurate. So let's talk a little bit about the history so that we're aware of it. First of all, you should know that 1621 celebration was at Plymouth Plantation in Massachusetts. And that's where this idea of Thanksgiving comes from. And I want you to know that essentially what occurred in this instance is that the British who had arrived to these soils were out of all of their supplies. Many of them who were coming to this new world did not come with formidable planting knowledge. So they certainly did not know how to really cultivate the land. They were unfamiliar with the native plants and animals that they might use for their sustenance. And they were delayed and were arriving it's believed in September or October. And so because they had arrived past the period where they would have been able to grow, they were not actually able to do so. And so they were suffering and on the verge of starvation. Well, they received assistance from a Native American man by the name of Squanto. You should know that he's often called Squanto, but his full name is usually oh goodness, now I'm going to forget his full name. He's a native of the Wampanoag people, and he actually is one of those individuals that through his assistance, we are able to find that these British are able to survive. And it's only through that they're able to survive. So his full name is Tisquantum. And you should know that he was part of the Wampanoag Confederation. These people, Dwa Sen Jason, he actually was part of the Wampanoag Federation, and the federation of people that were there were really a conglomerate of different Native American groups, right? They were called in total the Wampanoag Confederation, but his particular group was called the Pawtuxet, And he was there and he began to help these pilgrims learn how to catch eel and grow corn. You might say, well, how does Squanto or Tisquantum become involved? How does he begin his assistance of them? Well, you should know that his story is a painful one. 6 years earlier, he is kidnapped by Thomas Hunt, a British man, and then he is sold, I believe, to the French at some point as well. And he is enslaved with about 24 Native American men. During his enslavement, this is mostly before, well, no, let me not even say that, because we know that the first ship of Native Americans to be brought to a permanent settlement to be enslaved, they actually arrived in the United States not that far away from there in Virginia in 1619. So this is literally 3 years after Africans had already come. But this is certainly during a time that Native Americans were still being enslaved in larger numbers. That would end and mostly Africans would be enslaved. But he was enslaved for 6 years by a man named Thomas Hunt and even the French. And during this time, he had actually traveled, I believe, to Spain. He was taken to Spain and to other places, and he learned English during this time. And he eventually got to the point where he was able to return to his home. Imagine this would have been an amazing experience for him to be able to endure this horrible situation where the rest of the 24 men all died, all perished during their enslavement, but he was able to make his way back to the United States and to come home. But what does he find? He finds that the French sailors who had come had brought disease to his home, and that virtually everyone entirely in his village, his Pawtuxet village, had either died or certainly moved away because of the pestilence. So he returns home to find no home. This is horrific. And it is at this time that the Pilgrims have actually settled on the land of the Pawtuxet, his village, where all of his family and friends and all those people who were part of his extended family had either died or fled. The Pilgrims are actually there now. And you should know that the Pilgrims used to always say that when they got to the homes of the Pawtuxet, they were almost left in place. So while they had arrived when it was getting cold, they were able to move into this village. And they said it was providence, almost like God had guided them to a place that was not inhabited, so that they would be able to live in this space. They saw this as the hand of God. Can you imagine seeing this as the hand of God when the entire village of people had perished because of the things that Westerners had done? And so this was horrible. Well, Tisquantum actually decides that he's going to try to help them. And the thing that is so awkward about Tisquantum is he was not trusted by the other Wampanoag Federation people because he had been amongst the Europeans for so long. And he also was not trusted entirely, as you can imagine, by the Europeans who had now inhabited the space where he once lived. So he found himself as a person in between. At the very least, being able to speak both the languages of the Wampanoag and other native people and the languages of the Europeans, he was helpful to them. And he approaches the head of the Wampanoag Confederation, the Sachem, and his name was Massasoit, and he pleads with him to give these pilgrims aid, to give them supplies, because they had run out and they had not grown anything. And so Massasoit begrudgingly decides that he's going to give them something. And it is Squanto, better known as Tisquantum, that assists with this. So it is basically because they were saved by these native people that these pilgrims were able to survive. So in sometime in probably mid-October or so, a celebration was held. This is where the concept of this Thanksgiving dinner comes from. A celebration was held at the Plymouth plantation. And it wasn't just one dinner. It really was an event that lasted probably around 3 days. And it had 50 pilgrims and as many as 90 native people. So the native people outnumbered them greatly. This is also something that is not usually articulated in the imagery that we see. We often see many more pilgrims than we see natives, but that was not what happened. And I think that this is an important note because imagine these pilgrims were struggling on the verge of starvation, and this much larger group of Native Americans were there. They could have easily wiped them out, so if they had chosen to do so. But instead, they give them aid so that they can survive. Is this what they should have done? Well, certainly as a Kemetic priest, I am not suggesting that it would have been ma'atical for them to wipe out men, women, and children. But as I recognize my fundamental morality, I also recognize that the people that are involved do not display fundamental reality, that the Westerners don't do that. In fact, they come in larger and larger numbers and they seek to take control of the area. Massasoit actually becomes quite uncomfortable with the encroachment of more and more of these British people. And I want us to think a little bit about what happens next, because part of what happens is that we don't actually hear enough of the history to be able to understand exactly what occurred and have the proper context. And it is always interesting to me that people will talk about this mythically neighborly event called Thanksgiving, but they won't make the necessary historical connections that would show that they have any understanding of what truly occurred. I don't think anyone should be able to think about that event that actually occurred in 1621 and not connect it directly to what would occur immediately after. The best incident, I think, that we should connect is usually called King Philip's War. You cannot say that you understand Thanksgiving at all if you are not familiar with King Philip's War. How many of you have heard of King Philip's War? Show me in the chat. By the way, Ankan Ma'at Tisavi Kilo, RIP Turtle Island, God bless America, KKKA. I get it. Most of them were prisoners of war. Yes, many of them, media outlet, were actually prisoners of war. That is actually true. Prisoners, they were prisoners actually, not prisoners of war. They were prisoners and criminals that were sent over here. Ankan Ma'at, Tehem Netter, Daniel LaRoche, who was there. Ankan Ma'at to you. Wonderful that he is here with us. Ankan Ma'at to Immortal Dragon Review. And Aset Nefertari A'at, first time. Is that your first time here? Ankan Ma'at to you. I'm so honored that you've chosen to join us. Sen Jason, you have your hand raised. Are you trying to raise your hand and let us know something about this event? You should let us know. Please let us know. You know, Sen Jason, who is a full member of the Shrine of Ma'at, is a history buff like myself. So when Sen Jason and I gets to talking, but I want you, I think he's raising his hand saying that he had heard of Prince Philip's War. I think that's what he was doing. But you have to connect these two events. I know you might say, well, if That first event took place in 1621. This next event occurs in 1675. Jabari, you are talking about an event that is 50 years later. Think about what we're saying here. But here is why it is of importance. First of all, you should know, there's a typo. It says bloodiest wart. That's supposed to be bloodiest war. Ooh, that's disgusting. Bloodiest war. Bloodiest war in the United States per capita. This is an important point for us to recognize. But I want you to understand that as we look at this event, you must understand that King Philip's War is of critical importance. And by you understanding that it is the bloodiest war per capita, understand that while this space is not the United States yet, if you look at the number of people who live there at the time and the number of people who are killed in this war, it is the bloodiest war in this land per capita. That in and of itself should make it of interest. And you should understand that King Philip, whose original name was Metacom, is the second eldest son of Massasoit. Who's Massasoit, you might ask? Massasoit is the Sachem. He is the leader of the Wampanoag people who gave aid to the Pilgrims. So this person is literally his second son. Why the second? What happened to his eldest son? His eldest son, Wamsuta, who was later best known as Alexander by the Westerners, was captured by the English later, by the British, saying that he might have been plotting a rebellion, and supposedly he died mysteriously during his questioning, during the time that they questioned him. So this meant that now Metacom would become the head, the Sachem of the Wampanoag Confederacy. And you should know that they are very concerned about the increasing numbers of Westerners, of the British, of the English that are coming, the fact that they are taking prized trading lands, prize hunting lands, prize fishing lands, and claiming land and claiming them on for their own. In other words, saying they are not sharing it with those people that were here initially. And they began to do something very interesting. They began to convert many of the Native Americans to Christianity. By the time that King Metacom becomes the king, you should know that there's a group of Native Americans that are generally called praying Indians by the British. And this means that they have converted to Christianity. And you would think that since they converted to Christianity, this might actually mean that they were in a more amiable position. They had a more approachable relationship with the British, but in actuality, they were shunned in many ways and would be begging for assistance. And so while they had converted to the traditions of the European, they were not seeing benefit from this, their connection to this new tradition in the West or in North America. One of those praying natives, named John Sassman, actually claimed that he knew that King Philip was planning a rebellion, and John Sassman was found dead on an icy river. The British believed that he was their man, and they went about forcibly questioning people about what happened to him. They believed that 3 Native American men were the cause of this, and so they put those men to death. They hang them. They kill them without any input from the Native American people. And so you could imagine that the natives there were quite upset that these men had been killed. And this really enraged King Philip, better known as Metacom. It is during this time that he begins to carry out raids on the colonists. And you should know that in some of these raids, colonists were killed. He certainly was was pushing them because he recognized that they were not individuals who were trying to be neighborly and share the land. By the time we get to September 8th of 1775, the British actually declare war on the Wampanoag Confederacy and on King Philip. And you should know that the Mohawk and the Mohican fight on the side of the British, because one of the things that we see quite often is that they are often able to create conflict amongst groups and exploit that conflict. I see a few other comments. Ankan Ma'at, by the way, to Tuti Ma'at Ra Sirius B. Ankan Ma'at to you. Ankan Ma'at to Sinet Shenka, there as Olivia B. McGraw. Good to see you, Sinet. And I see that Sen Jason is saying that we were often taught they ate turkey, but they were most likely eating eel. You should hear, you know, he's a history buff like myself. Let me say that that is absolutely true. It's not believed that they were eating turkey at all, that they probably were eating corn and eel. Eel is one of the things that they were able to trap very easily from the rivers in that area. And so they were likely, and also deer, by the way. We know that the native people, I think they brought 3 or 4 deer to the celebration. So we're eating venison as well. But it's not believed that turkey was amongst those things that they were eating, which is very interesting. It's part of how the propaganda has continued. During this war, hundreds of British and thousands of natives were killed during this war that is usually called King Philip's War. And you should know that on August 20th, 1676, an English Indian soldier, a person of mixed race, John Alderman, shoots King Philip and kills him at Mount Hope. And the British then take King Philip's body, they hang his lifeless body, they behead him, he is drawn and quartered, and they place his head on a pike that is displayed at Plymouth County for 2 decades. You should understand that when you look at what occurs with the family of Massasoit, that king or sachem of the Wampanoag, who assisted the Pilgrims in their position of need. And you look at what happens just a few generations later. In fact, you could say 1 generation later, when you see the King Metacom War, the King Philip War. It should be clear what these Native Americans will do, face later on. By the way, this image of King Philip I thought was very interesting. I'm not sure if you know, if you're familiar with it, but if you take a look at it, it is actually drawn and painted by Paul Revere. Yes, that Paul Revere. The Paul Revere that actually will be one of the most memorable characters in the Revolutionary War, the American Revolutionary War. This was actually done by him. And so I found that to be quite interesting as well. My mouse is acting up. So I want us to listen to the words of a man named William Appice. William Appice was a Pequot native, but you should understand that he was a mixed race person. There's some people who say that he was Pequot, English, and definitely African American. And whenever I look at the engravings of him, I can often see what looks to me like African features as well. He was a mixed race person. He was also a Methodist minister, a veteran of the War of 1812, and an advocate for the Mashpee Wampanoag community to continue its autonomy and self-rule in the 1830s. He reads a very popular speech at Odeon Lecture Hall in Boston. Remember, it's the same place that these events that I've been talking to you about occur at an earlier date. He reads this speech known as the Eulogy of King Philip, the Eulogy on King Philip in 1836. Appice says that he is aware that King Philip says these things shortly before he is killed. Listen to his quote from Metacom, sometimes known as King Philip. He says, "Brothers, you see this vast country before us, which the Great Spirit gave to our fathers and to us. You see the buffalo and deer that now are our support. Brothers, you see these little ones, our wives, our children, who are looking to us for food and raiment. And you now see the foe before you, that they have grown insolent and bold, that all our ancient customs are disregarded. The treaties made by our fathers and us are broken, and all of us are insulted. Our council fires disregarded, and all the ancient customs of our fathers, our brothers, murdered before our eyes. And their spirits cried to us for revenge. Brothers, these people from the unknown world will cut down our groves, spoil our hunting and planting grounds, and drive us and our children from the graves of our fathers and our council fires, and enslave our women and children." So he says that this is a quote that comes from King Philip shortly before his death, as he is attempting to ensure that his people fight back against the European. And we know that as he describes the rationale for fighting them, that he is absolutely correct about what will actually occur. And this is quite prophetic in many ways, that we should know that this event where we gather to eat food and to enjoy each other, we should actually put it in proper context and recognize that the European did dastardly things, horrific things to the native people. You should know that in the ensuing years, we should know that the Native Americans found that their wells had been poisoned by the Europeans. How do you poison a well? That when you poison a well, you know that you are actually attempting to kill everyone, men, women, and children, the firm and the infirm, that your goal is to annihilate, to practice genocide, not to go to war and fight against soldiers, but to kill everyone indiscriminately. We know that the Europeans did this. In fact, you should know that smallpox was one of the things that the Europeans used to kill Native Americans. I'm not simply saying that the Native Americans actually found that they had contracted smallpox from the Europeans. That certainly happened. But you should know that these British intentionally utilized this virulent disease as biological warfare. Listen to the words of a soldier known as William Trent. He writes a treatise on the siege of Fort Pitt in 1763. He says, "Out of our regard to them," meaning the Native Americans, "we gave them 2 blankets and a handkerchief out of the smallpox hospital. I hope it will have the desired effect." Understand that they were attempting to annihilate the Native American, and clearly that is what occurs. And in fact, even when we look at something like the Trail of Tears, we know that 4,000 Native people die as they are forced on foot to relocate from the southwestern United States to west of the Mississippi River. We see the great annihilation of the Native American and the later enslavement of the African, while we are told that we should celebrate what these pilgrims did in 1621, 3 years after the White Lion arrives on the shore in Virginia, carrying enslaved Africans. We know what occurred, and we must not allow them to propagandize these moments, to make us think that they have been moral, that they have been neighborly, that they have been decent and good people to those that they have encountered. In fact, we must recognize that they have been the most devilish, that they have killed indiscriminately, that they have massacred, that they have enslaved, that they have raped, that they have tortured, and that they have murdered. This is the truth of Thanksgiving. Today, we know that the Native Americans have the highest unemployment rate of any group in the United States, even higher than African Americans, by the way. Their employment rate is almost 50% yearly. And they have the highest suicide rate of any group. We know that Native Americans, there's been a lot said about this in the last few years that you ought to be aware of, that Native Americans are now talking about the fact that even when they signed treaties with the Europeans, they were routinely broken. And one of the things that that these Europeans would often do is they would give the Catholic Church and the Episcopal Church that land and those dollars that were supposed to be set aside for the Native American for their education in boarding schools. And we know that those children were torn away from their families in the boarding schools, that in their first moments, they would shave their heads. As their hair was a critical connection to their culture, they would shave their heads. And in these places, we see mass graves of children, that these children were harmed, were tortured. These boarding schools had the slogan, "Kill the native and save the man." And so not only are we seeing the literal genocide of the native peoples, we are also seeing the cultural genocide of native peoples. This is the legacy of Thanksgiving. In fact, if you look below at the etching in this image, you are going to see an etching that comes from Father Bartolomé de las Casas as he described what the Spanish soldiers were doing to native people on the island of Hispaniola, where you can see that they would routinely find pregnant native women, cut their bellies out as they have taken cast lots, as they have taken bets on what the gender of the child inside would be, and then they would hang the child. They hoped the child would be long enough that they would cry when they tore them out, by the way. And if that happened, the person that wagered properly, successfully on the gender would even make more money. And then they would kill the mother and hang the child by their umbilical cord on the mother. They would feed those babies to their dogs. The sorts of things that they did were absolutely inhumane. And we must not forget that this is how they came to this land. As they argue now that they're trying to keep illegals out, people whose families can directly tie themselves to these lands in its more ancient time. They're keeping illegals out. This is the hypocrisy of the Westerner. This is the hypocrisy of white supremacy. This is the hypocrisy of Thanksgiving. Now, you should know that in 1789, George Washington created a national day of Thanksgiving, but it isn't until 1863 that Abraham Lincoln creates a federal holiday on the fourth Thursday of every November. Did you know that it was Abraham Lincoln that put Thanksgiving as we know it today into existence, that made it this celebration on this weekend that we are now ending? It is George Washington and Abraham Lincoln that gave these holidays to us. So I want to ask you a question as I come to a close. Should Thanksgiving be forgotten? Should we just simply find ourselves ensconced in parade with beloved cartoon characters as balloons walking in front of Macy's here in New York? Or should we actually cast aspersions to the fact that Black families gather on these days and support each other on these days? Is that what we should do? Is that the right thing to do? Well, I'm going to say to you that I myself have mellowed a little bit on this issue. I certainly remember that we do know that George Washington was a real person, actually. We're able to prove that he was. there are lots of ways that we can prove that he was, including through his lineage, through his things that we know that he wrote, through the letters and the comments of other people that we know who lived, talking about their relationships with George Washington. We also know the history of the people he enslaved. We know that his wife, who lived longer than him, we know what she did. We do know that George Washington was a literal historical person, Tiannis. So I know that when I was a younger man, what I used to do is berate and bemoan my family who wanted to celebrate. And I still don't enjoy gathering on that particular Thursday in November. But I have told myself that whenever my family gathers, I will be there, because definitely it's one of the ways that I maintain the relationships with my more distant relatives. Now that I'm an adult, a man on the 5th floor, a man in my 50s, I don't spend as much time with family as I used to. And so when they gather, I try to gather with them. And I also recognize that as we look at these days, that these same Europeans attacked Black families. These same Europeans took control of the sexuality and the procreation of enslaved Africans, and would tear families apart, so that when we actually come together, in many ways, we are practicing a revolutionary act. However, I do feel reticent that we gather on the same day that they do. I think that we should do more. There used to be a celebration on the Friday after that Thursday that has become the Thanksgiving holiday, that was called the Day of Umoja. And this was something that was practiced in the 1980s. I don't know anyone that practices it today. But definitely, we should be talking more about how we will celebrate family in a place that attempts to destroy our families, in a place that attempts to control our families. Here's the plaque that the natives living in the area around Plymouth have put up. And I think that it's informative as well. It says that Thanksgiving for them is a national day of mourning. Since 1970, Native Americans have gathered at noon on Coles Hill in Plymouth to commemorate a national day of mourning on the United States Thanksgiving holiday. Many Native Americans do not celebrate the arrival of the Pilgrims and other European settlers. To them, Thanksgiving Day is a reminder of the genocide of millions of their people, the theft of their lands, and a relentless assault on their culture. Participants in the National Day of Mourning honor Native ancestors and the struggles of Native peoples to survive today. It is a day of remembrance and spiritual connection, as well as a protest to the racism and oppression which Native Americans continue to experience. Erected by the town of Plymouth on behalf of the United American Indians of New England. This is the plaque that Native people have placed so that we can remember what occurs. Very quickly, I want to say that the concept of giving thanks to the Neteru, to the ancestors for what you have, is not one that should be considered something in the province of the European, in the wheelhouse of the European. In fact, it is Africans who have celebrated harvest festivals since time immemorial. It is Africans that have given thanks to the ancestors and to the Neteru for all of the things that the land has produced for us, to us for sustenance, for the continued health of our communities. We have records of these celebrations, records of these prayers, records of these applications to the divine that come from a time where no one else was writing. That some of the first things that Africans write are their prayers of thanks, and they talk about their celebrations of thanks. In fact, if you could look here, this is a scene from the tomb of Senejem and Nefertari and Neferti, and I want you to recognize that they are celebrating in the afterlife. They're saying that because of their lives in the afterlife, because of their lives on the physical plane, their existence on the afterlife will be one where there will be fields to till, that they will have plenty in existence. And we should recognize that Africans have always said dua to the Neteru for what they received. You're seeing here what is sometimes called the famine stele. It is on an island in modern southern Kemet, and it describes how there was a famine in the area during the reign of that third dynasty king known as Djoser Neteriket, and Djoser sends his first in command, that man named Imhotep, down to assist. And as he investigates why the Hapi is not providing, the Hapi, that river that is now misnomered the Nile River, why the Hapi is not providing in that region as it once did, he recognizes that he needs to give offering and give thanks to the Neteru in that area. He gives thanks to Khnum. He gives thanks to Anuket. He gives thanks to Neat and Serket. And he says that he gives them offerings so that the people may live. By the way, he also sets aside a section near the Hapi in the south that will be only considered the land of the Neteru, that there will be no farming or sowing on. And in many ways, I think he's also creating what we can consider today a nature preserve, a nature preserve. And so we see that the concept of giving thanks is one that our African ancestors have done since time immemorial. I want to ask you, what should you give thanks for? And how should you do it? Let's engender a conversation around how we can shift ourselves away from the same time frame, the same celebrations, the same schedule of the European who enslaved us, who stole us, who tortured us and virtually annihilated all of the Native Americans. How do we give thanks in the manner that our ancestors would, while not finding ourselves controlled by the holidays of the Westerners? I no longer bemoan or beguile my family members when they want to gather. When they gather, I gather. I remember as a very young man, one year when my father was still alive, as he brought the turkey to the table, a large turkey, must have been a 20-pounder because we had so many family members there. As soon as he put it on the table, I had created an articulated model of an enslavement ship. I had painted my face red. I slammed it on the table next to the turkey and said, "This is what you're celebrating, the annihilation, the degradation, the enslavement of your ancestors." And I remember my poor father just saying, "Go upstairs, we'll give you food, go upstairs," because he didn't want to get into a large fracas with all of my family and extended family around. I used to beat my family up about it. But I got to the point where I recognize that it is not wise for me to beat those people who love and support me up. It is not their fault that this day occurs. It is not their fault that they have been raised in a society that utilizes propaganda that dismisses the annihilation of the Native American and enslavement of the African. So what we should be doing is teaching and deciding what direction we must go in, so that we, as those descendants of those Africans who experienced some of the most inhumane things that any human can possibly endure, that we, their descendants, prove that we remember them, that we honor them, and that we honor their traditions and their culture. We must recognize that we are continuing to struggle. We may not be fighting on the side of Metacom today, but we must recognize that his battle is not over. We may not be fighting on the side of Nat and others. Nat Turner is not standing in front of us galvanizing soldiers to fight against our enslavement. Gabriel of Prosser is not standing in front of us. Harriet Tubman is not leading us literally, but they are leading us spiritually. They're leading us from the ancestral realm to take back our traditions and push back against the destruction of the African and the Native American. I am hoping that we will continue this conversation so that we are able to figure out another way to do this. But with that, let me remind you, don't beat up your family. Try to give them love and myrrh and teach them as well. This year, I read the speech from William Apess. And I know that some of my family members were like, oh my goodness, is this a history lesson? Yes, it's a history lesson. So I read it at our gathering this year. And many of my younger relatives, I could see on their faces while they didn't want to have a history lesson, that they were listening carefully and that it's going to mean something to them going forward. Let's try to remember our ancestors and help our families to remember them as well. With that, the divine force in me greets the divine force in you. I hope that you are enjoying family as this weekend comes to a close. I'm hoping that you are working with them, and I'm hoping that you will get up in your altar and give a divine bit of thanks to the ancestors who struggled. In fact, this would be a day that I would even light a candle to Metacom. He may not be an African ancestor, but he certainly recognized what was coming. And that which was coming also greatly affected the African. I think it's time for us to recognize that these ancestors' battles have not been lost, that we are still waging them on their behalf. With that, the divine force in me greets the divine force in you. Go forth in great peace and love. Shemin Ma'at. I'll see you soon.